Hi, I'm Seamless, and this is another how to bass tutorial, and today I'm going to show you how to make this sound. It's a hammer into a wave shaper being compressed. So this is delicate. By that what I mean, this compressor and this wave shaper are both on their very high frequency, sort of high CPU mode. This is the anti-aliasing setting. This is its highest setting. I have oversampling on engaged here, and I also have the linear phase mode on. And for the distortion's sake, the reason why is because the whole point of this is to actuate some high frequency realities. And then for the compression wants to be compressing in such a way that respects how cool the phase was coming out of this. Because this is what this sounds like without either of these dudes. Actually, let's just do this one at a time. Here's what it sounds like all together. Here's what's just the distortion. Pretty rad. Here's what's just it. Practically the same signal. Let's observe the distortion's effect. So, I also have the mix is almost all the way off anyway, but you can see it up here why. All the way up on there is a lot of high frequency damage. And I wanted that texture, but I just don't want it to be that loud. But I do just need it there. So I just make sure it had the balance to basically do the job of essentially filling in the gap that Harmer leaves. So that it just feels balanced. But truth be told though, I want to point something out that's interesting. Other than the fact that I have distortion engaged here, but even without it, even without this on, or even this, well, it's clipping too, so without that happening. Alright, I wanted you to pay attention to the frequency activity that's happening up here. Just to make this easier, I guess we'll look at this through an EQ. The point I'm making is that you can get high frequency definition without having high frequencies. This frequency, this situation of spectral reality, complicated word to say, just to see like what's happening basically is that there's a lot of motion in between it, and then the rate of that motion is absolutely high enough frequency that we are feeling an experience of it, but we can't see it. We can't see it because it's the result of what this is just existing. So, and how I get there is by making this individual harmer essentially as complicated as I possibly can, but while keeping it noticeably this complicated, but by keeping it still harmonic enough that it's a note. And this was it accomplished well enough that the result was possible, which is that we can play astonishingly low notes, and you can still tell what they are. That's a lot. So let's figure out how this was. By figure out, I mean show you. So there's two kind of big important things that make this how this works. The big one is that I'm not doing panning on the individual unisons, but what I am doing is I'm panning to both the parts separately. And because I have the randomness on its highest randomness, which means every individual unison voice on each part individually is being randomized individually, the fact that A and B are panned left and right through this window here, this is an envelope I just put over there and over there. This means that they are different enough left and right that it just sounds nice and spread. I have also randomized key parameters. Well, in particular, I think it's just this guy. I don't think I randomized much more. This one and this guy, just differently, in more or less the same range around the deal, just to make sure that it's just a little bit different always. And of course, I have the phase randomness on engaged, kind of, but that will be different per thing, per voice and per thing. So that means that they'll add up in their own special way, and that special way that it adds up will be different, but similar enough that it still sounds balanced basically always. That's the goal. That was the main thing. The other thing was that because we've done this, we get to use unison index mapping in a special way. Usually when I do unison index mapping, what I do is I use this center position voice to represent the center of whatever I'm doing, and then I try to make whatever I'm doing symmetrical. This is usually because I'm doing stereo out of one unison batch, and this will mean that whatever change I make, if I make it this kind of lopsided, you'll hear that usually in the unison. You'll definitely experience that, like a filter or something is like higher or lower, or left or right, and it won't feel balanced. It won't feel different, but it won't feel balanced. But if you're just not using stereo, then you don't have that as a problem, and then you actually get to have the linear spread of different voices as opposed to like basically half as many, because the other half is just the stereo side again, usually. So that's what this thing is able to approach the complication that made this sound like the way it did. And I'm going to show you how all that worked out, especially with the core guys, with the new guy. So because the core one, I made a new prism shape by going into harmonic prism, deleting what is here, and then when I draw, so just to recap what this graph is, because this is important. This is looking at an octave-based view of the harmonics, whereas this is a Hertz-based view. Hertz-based view gives you one little bit for every one harmonic that exists. You can see the octaves pile up in the discoloration. This implies certain harmonic grouping. And then in the other kinds of graph, this is representative octaves. So that octave coloration you saw is now, instead of being differently sized, they are all now given the same size. And here they are. These are the octaves. Really, this last octave is this last octave, half of all the harmonics. You have to remember that when you're trying to make changes on things, because what it also means is that first octave is just this, the first harmonic, and nothing else. So doing action in between this and that does absolutely nothing. It does not make any change on any parameter, because the next available thing to change is this thing here, which represents the first harmonic. Then the middle harmonic, there's one harmonic in between this guy and this guy. And then there's two between this guy and this guy. 4, 8, double, crazy time. Is it double? It's a lot. Yeah, right. Anyway, so what I tend to make out of these graphs when I might make them custom is just to kind of scale it so that the activity is denser as I go higher and also farther away from center. Just because that's how the effect will still be balanced. If I play a note, the distance of the pushed away harmonics is not as such that it threads the overall sort of knowledge that there's a harmonic structure and a fundamental tone. Just makes it easier for doing tone stuff. So though, what the prism is kind of like the single voice core unison setting, because the unison also has one of these graphs where you can change this value but per harmonic, but it's the unison one. So when you change the spread, it's giving us 2 or however many voices you set, and it's saying, okay, there's going to be a spread of different pitches, and if I make a different shape, it will spread all those shapes away from each other too. But what if I wanted to have a lot? What I mean by that is essentially, because of this thing I said about the unison index mapping, we can do that manually with the prism. We can say that all of these voices that are spread this way, which are all different positions, are now all different from each other. Playing out, damn you. So, by the way, this visualizer here, when you're playing it, it's showing you the first voice in the list. When you're given the unison index mapping. So voice number 1 is literally voice number 1 here. So you see how when I brought down the prism, it made all these changes. That's basically saying that every one of these unison voices has every one of these stages in difference from each other. And that's why that's quite some activity creating there. So now this is what I meant about high frequency activity from within low frequency literal frequencies. You can sort of see how the fuzziness of the activity of it all there is essentially happening. The farther away it is from center, the more that happens. And the more that math adds up to higher and higher frequencies and tighter like stacks of it, because you have more and more voices, the higher frequency the result of that is. Because yeah, and that will make this a much more complicated tone when it's pushed into distortion, but the balance should still be there of the low enough power, still making it a bass. Ideally. Now, to make it this next element, what I was really trying to do with having distortion at the first stage was to try and make it hairy, but make it so you can still hear the original softness. And then it was a lot of altering whatever I could and found could to do. Whatever I could and found could to do, yeah. Wow, Seamless has always used words. He promises. So I'm always messing with this guy, and this is the phaser. And if you put the phaser after the prism, once you've done this craziness, which it is a dependent, what that means essentially is that this phaser, because it changes its position based on pitch alteration, and if every one of the voices has different pitch alteration, that also means every one of them has a different phaser articulation. Phaser articulation. I don't know what accent that is, but that's what came out of my face. What I did with the other guy was I did a little bit of this. So it's there, but it's not quite there. It's a lot of them stacked together. And then I did mention the randomizing, and I'll do the randomizing here. And that's where you set it this, because by default, it's not on this. And now every voice is random. But it's solid. It's just mono, and it's... So we want to pan it. And we do this by copying our part, pasting part to B, and turning this on so we don't screw ourselves up some stuff. Then ba-bam. Then ba-bam. Now, the voices are so similar that they're not different enough to really sound like they're panned. The fact that they sound, or did I do that wrong? Nope, I did that right. The fact that it sounds mono, because, yeah. So to make it more spread, you just change other primary parameters with some randomness. And I can do that to this, like even just a little bit. Because this little bit difference will be different for every one of these voices, and then that will also be different for these because I will tell it to be different. And look at that, wow, look at that. Oof. So then that's the result of this. If you can get a coherent enough like noise anomaly to still yet kind of respect a harmonic weighting of power, when you play a low enough note, you get the whole harmonic stack all the way up, even though we don't play it all because this is Harmor and we don't have all the harmonics. It's because the sum total of motion between all 18 of these voices is enough to be fast enough to have that up there. Like that should sound low pass. Does it really? It sounds nice and dark, but like I could keep going with this. So another trick I did here with the multiplier over here is I scrunched it up with the detune, and then I just octaved it up again. But in this case, I could just. It is true that we're also distorting it, but over here, this is still just the result. Like if I didn't have that there. So that's it, not clipping, not playing those high harmonics, and there's no action up there, but it really sounds like there is, doesn't it? And the handy part is that the physical truth of that can be exemplified by just distorting its top end with the tingiest bit of distortion. Because what we are feeling as a product of math in the air, we can make visible by forcing that signal with all that motion at those rates into something that then processes all of that with multiplied harmonics, because then it multiplies that motion, which is that fast, and you very quickly get the remainder. Now, what I did with the other guy, that shape I made, what I in particular wanted to do was I really wanted to keep it within like its main oscillation. Sure, its main oscillation is to be kind of like respected and allowed, but then the highest tippiest bits are the ones that get shaped and multiplied. And then I readjusted the mix so that addition could occur in the other guy, like it does. So What other thing else special I did in here? Yeah, okay. Using the phaser width, is it there? I'm also randomizing it with a different shape per thing. And then keyboard mapping. Okay, so yeah, I also wanted to make the keys themselves different. And here's something that I didn't think. I'm a little bit lost. I kind of get how I think this means something, but it's nice that it works this way, but it's like it technically shouldn't. So this is cool. What happens here is that this is the unison phase, which determines the spread of the starting phase from within the unison's changes between the voices, and this is the unison index mapping value for this because there's an articulator on this particular parameter. Thing is though, what the hell does this mean per unison voice if this is a thing that governs, this parameter governs the spread of all the voices, and what does that mean to change this value per voice? And what I have determined this means is that it just nudges the starting phase in whatever direction you're determining of the individual voice. So it will do whatever whatever the phase spread of whatever type of unison you're doing, and then this is basically a phase offset, which is exactly what it should be. That's great. Because there is no actual like straight up global phase option. This guy doesn't have an articulator. And then this guy is a per harmonic deal. So this acts as global phase per voice in the unison index mapping. Isn't that something? So that's there doing that. I'm not randomizing it, but this is helping certain tonal issues. Like, because for example, I have it all the way up. I have this phase all the way up. And Harmor does something interesting when you have the phase all the way up. It does what it calls running phase. Well, it calls what it calls full blur. And it what it has always sounded like to me is that it jumps straight to just maximum random on phase, even if you don't have that set. And that's cool, neat, it's effective. Just it's a very large step from to that. So what I did with the unison index mapping was to essentially say that it's really only true for one voice, because it's also only true when it's at its max setting. Anything less than that is not that. So that means one voice gets to have the really big damage, and then the rest of them actually get to just be different settings, which if you weight differently, actually creates a different phase distribution, which causes different phase cancellation due to the positioning, and that causes a different tonality to occur. It's a neat thing to experiment with. And that's how you make those match up. Look how well defined that still is. It's nuts. Oh yeah, so anyway, to recap about our original guy, this is what it sounds like coming out normal. Here's what it comes out sounding like in the distortion. Just highest end of tinge. Now, in the compressor, I treated this just slightly differently than usual. And that is that I did mono out the lows a little, and I spread the stuff a little, but I did not push it too far, and I did let it be the way to actually, because it's definitely still spread a little bit. The reason why so low. That sounds high, doesn't it? Elephant bass, y'all. Anyway, moral of the story is that if I go too far out of like correct the original stereo phase, it like actually damages how stable the sound is. It damages because we've done a very good job if you've done all of these things to keep the phase kind of awesome. We've gotten because of all like the whole randomness and starting position, the fact that I'm kind of staying very solidly on just kind of just a note being held, because like I have blur on here, but I don't even I'm using the phaser. I guess it's blurring that. Is it even after it? Where is it? It is before it. So the phaser's action is happening, but like it's being smeared so completely that you don't even really hear it moving, even though it's also not moving. And I wanted this all to be just a very solid sound, and and so that like when it gets fed through the distortion, it doesn't move too much outside of the things that are happening here so fast that if it happens twice, it doesn't sound imbalanced. And all throughout that, if you've maintained your phase cohesion, you come up here and you continue to maintain your phase cohesion by caring about stuff like linear phase and oversampling, then you also just don't want to screw with the imaging of it, because this is a phase change to accomplish this. or at least it causes one. Well, it definitely causes one because it changes the essentially the breakage between them all. And if it's usually the breakage is already so great that to do it further just sounds better. But in this very specific individual instance, it actually just, you can tell it gets worse because it's actually just so clean. And that's the quality we want to maintain. Did I have anything in here? Nope, just that. Neat. All right, well, if you have any questions about that, let me know. I don't know why I have this accent. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and all of that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.